Hi, good afternoon, good morning, and good night to folks joining us around the world on various platforms here today for our next conversation in our Women in Business series. A great lineup of some leaders from public sector organizations and different things going on today. Before we get into that, and I hand it over to Verizon Business's CEO, Tami, Erwin, want to set the stage for you, though. I know a lot of you have questions already, a couple in here. If you want to, go to slido.com and use code WIB for Women in Business, and we will get those questions over for the panel here shortly. So, Tami, with that, I will turn it over to you. Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. And what a delight it is to spend some time this afternoon with three really impressive women as we continue our series, Women in Business, and focus our conversation today on public sector. This is actually our last episode in Women in Business, and what an appropriate way to end as we think about the year we've had and the service of those who serve in the public sector. So really just honored to have these three women with us today as we talk about COVID, leadership, racial justice, and whatever topics might be on your mind. I'm going to lead the conversation, and then we'll create room for Q&A. And as Jeremy said, we'd really like an interactive dialogue and conversation. I do want to, as I've done before, just a sincere shout out and gratitude to our partners, CircleAround and National Association of Women Business Owners, who've helped us pull this series off as we've looked at COVID and the expectation that more women are falling out of the workforce than ever before. What we heard from so many of you was bring together a panel of experts on verticals. And so we've covered finance, we've covered sports, and now we're going to cover public sector. So we've covered a number of different verticals. I've given you a couple of those. But today we're going to go into public sector, and I'm going to start. We've got a great lineup of panelists. I said to them, I only wish we were all seated in a room, four chairs, and we'd really have a face-to-face dialogue, but we're going to continue to use technology that has worked so well for us as we think about where we are in kind of the continuation of COVID. I'm going to start today by asking each of them to introduce themselves, and I'm specifically going to ask them to give us a quick highlight of their background and how their CV would read, but to also share one thing that might not be on their CV. So I'm going to start, Beth, with you and ask if you'd kick us off, please.
Sure. Thank you. And thank you, Tami, and thank you for pulling this all together. I think this is a very important aspect to be able to bring women together and to hear from other women that have achieved things, as well as those that are just starting out. So I started in emergency management 35 years ago with the state of Utah. I was, just so you know, I was like 3 at the time. Adding up those numbers, it's amazing how quick they go. But started at the state of Utah and then moved down to Arizona, which I currently reside, and then was asked during the Obama administration to come back and to work at FEMA headquarters. And at the end of that, I was the associate administrator over response and recovery. So everything that you see in the news all the time was what I was responsible for, and had the great opportunity to work with so many wonderful people back then for those 8 years. So that was really the pinnacle of it for me, and currently do work, still work in emergency management and stay very engaged in it. It is truly my passion of life, and had great opportunities at FEMA to help mentor many women and men through the profession. When you threw the question out there to what's not on my CV, and since the Girl Scouts with CircleAround are also sponsoring this, I thought, well, let me go back to my Girl Scout career. I barely made it through Brownies, which was the precursor in Minnesota where I was growing up, and then I kind of got kicked out. So So didn't survive, but love the Girl Scouts and their foundation, what they do, and actually established Girl Scout Day at FEMA while I was there. So we brought in hundreds of Girl Scouts from around the area there in Washington, D.C., as well as our regional offices. So that was wonderful to be able to do that too. So thank you very much for inviting me here today.
How awesome. Got kicked out of Girl Scouts as a child, but came full circle and having a Girl Scouts event with FEMA. That's awesome. And I can only imagine kind of how your mind is spinning right now as we think about the crisis we're in, the public health crisis that we're in, and the transfer of administration and power. I mean, your mind must be spinning. We'll come back to that. I'm going to move to Dr. Tamika Alford-Stephens. She told me I could call her Tamika, but I had to say the full title because it's impressive. So Tamika, to you.
Thank you, Tami. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad to be here with you all in this space. Thank you for creating this opportunity for individuals such as myself to bring my voice to the table. I have served as an educator for the past 20 years of my life. Started as a third grade teacher and has served in many roles since then. A very non-traditional path to the CFO, and now the district's Chief Business and Operations Officer. I work for Aldine Independent School District here in Houston, Texas, and we serve approximately 67,000 students. We have about 9,000 staff members and 82 campuses and 10 additional instructional facilities. So I oversee just over $780 million across 3 major budget areas. And from the time they get off the bus until the technology device that we put in their hand, to the meals we feed them at school, all of that falls primarily under my leadership. So again, thank you for allowing me to be here today, and I look forward to the conversation.
And I wonder what you do in your spare time with that scope of responsibility. What might we not find on your CV that we should know about you?
You know what? I am an avid sports fan. And my husband and I are a part. We started a nonprofit with a group of friends last year, Fit Kids. And through that work, we focus on not only kids being healthy, but we have a branch or an extension of that called Texas Footwork Bengals. And so we have a basketball team that my husband coaches. And it's just a joy to see kids come together and learn about leadership in a different way and teamwork. So very proud of the opportunity to be able to be a part of that whole process.
I love that. And that's something that shouldn't be a secret. Will help to get the word out because of what great work and such timely work when we think about 2020 and the year it's been. I'm going to come to Chief Trisha Wolford. And I say chief because it's a big title. And I want you to tell us about the work that you do in Arundel County. So impressive. Trisha, to you.
Thank you, Tami. Thank you for having me here. Elizabeth, Tamika, what a pleasure to be on the screen with both of you. I've just been diving into both of your backgrounds. So really, even if you didn't even get to this session, just to learn about the two of you, just thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of this. So I'm the fire chief in Anne Arundel County, Maryland, which we're a jurisdiction that's just outside Baltimore City. We cover the city of Annapolis and some of those outlying areas. We're a combination fire department, which means we have career firefighters and volunteer firefighters. We have 31 fire stations, 4 administrative buildings, about 1,500 firefighters, along with we run our own 911 dispatch center, civilian support, and then, you know, everything from top to bottom of high angle rescues because of our Bay Bridge to fire prevention and fire investigation and explosives. We serve about 600,000 residents and 580 square miles. A little fun fact for fire jurisdictions, we actually have the most coastline of any other fire department jurisdiction, which you would not think would be right here in Maryland, but we have 7 peninsulas. And so we cover a lot of water rescue territory also. Let's see, a random fun fact. Maybe it's not so random, but you wouldn't find it on my CV. This is my 14th year in the fire service. I absolutely love what we do. I pretty much cannot get through a conversation without smiling about it. And you really have to. It's a lifestyle. We're 24/7, 365. So as a CEO, we never close our doors. We don't go to bed. And it's interesting running a business with that model and with a success rate of what is expected to be 100%. So There's about 30,000 fire departments in the United States. I'm one of less than 50 female fire chiefs. I'm very, very blessed to have 2 other female fire chiefs in the state of Maryland running equally large departments like mine. Our large departments are what we call metro departments. So myself and 2 others, and recently there was a 4th. She recently retired. So we were the only state in the country that had 4 female fire chiefs leading hundreds of thousands of firefighters, which is pretty incredible. So my random fact is I recently climbed Mount Fuji. Great experience. If you've ever seen the sunrise up there, you'll never see a more beautiful sunrise than when you feel like you're literally on top of the world. So it's a great way to de-stress too. So thank you.
Wow. There's so many common factors as I hear each of you introduce yourself, your commitment to service and your commitment to service with a smile and incredible commitment. The scope of work that you each talk about is incredibly impressive. And then you find time for these moments like, climbing Mount Fuji in your spare time. So, the inspiration never continues. But, our conversation today is really about, as we think about what's happened in 2020, we think about COVID and the year-long crisis. We think about the fact that we're wrapping up a year and going into 21 with a lot of uncertainty. In your roles, either prior roles or current roles, you're playing such an important role as we think about how do we help guide the public? How do we play a role in service? How do we make sure public can really do what's required, whether it's education, whether it's first responder, whether it's FEMA and the work that's been done with the private-public partnership and the work that's done, such a commitment to service. And I'd like to maybe start, Beth, with you about what's it like to be in public service as a woman? Trisha talked about being one of a very small handful of women that take on these roles. What did you find as your biggest challenge and biggest opportunity as a woman in public service and serving that sector?
Yeah, I thank you for that. I would say, the biggest challenge is you are the only woman sitting at the table. At FEMA headquarters there's a big conference room table, all the leadership comes together, and there may be 2 or 3 of you, but to be the one that's sitting right up there at the head and to be able to be responsible for that, but at the same time be that role model. So just being there and getting your voice to be heard. So I was lucky that it was a great team, and so my voice would be heard. But it's important, and one of the lessons I learned was you sit at the table. You don't ever take that second seat back or say, "Oh, go ahead, sit at the table." No, you get yourself right up there so that you can be heard and seen. So people will know that you're there and being able to help make those decisions, help guide the vision, and to be able to move things forward is so important.
I think such powerful counsel as you think about you've earned that seat at the table and now live into that seat at the table, and also how lonely it can be when you are the only one. And I think for so long we've talked about diversity as representation, and that's no longer enough. It's about inclusion and authenticity and being able to really bring the depth of experience and capabilities that we have as women to serve and to do so with the voice that we've earned at the table. So such a powerful reminder. Tamika, how do you think about that from an education standpoint? I mean, if there's ever been a year that we've had disruption in education, it's this year. How do you think about your role? What are some of the challenges? What guidance would you give us?
Yeah, again, great question. And I think I can echo a few of the sentiments that were just offered when it comes to when you have that seat at the table. You have to be willing to bring your voice and your knowledge and be courageous in what you say and mean what you say. I know that through my experiences, there have not been many women as chief financial officers in the public sector in this way. But when I think about being a chief financial officer and beyond, now being that operational leader as well, most of those positions have men serving in those capacities. And so, and very few women of color, if I can say that as well. So just knowing that if you're at the table, you've earned the right to be at the table, and don't be afraid to sometimes what I call get in a little bit of good trouble when you're trying to do and say the right things for the right reasons.
Okay, I can tell that you've hit a sweet spot for Trisha when she said get in a little bit of trouble. So Trisha, I'm going straight to you because I saw the smile on your face, like, yeah, I understand this getting a little bit of good trouble.
Well, yeah, if there's one environment that, we hope to improve in the fire service, it is bringing in a more diverse culture. Really, that's what we're trying to do here. And when you talk about sitting at that table and making decisions that men have never heard a no from a woman, those are impactful emotional moments for everybody in that room. And I think I would only add that you do want your voice to be heard, just like Tamika is saying. But then once you say it, you really have to trust your voice. You have to trust that you have done the legwork, you have put in the time, you have the research and the data to back it, and that you're going to stand your ground. Because sometimes it's really easy to squeak out just that original thought and throw it out there in the room and see what happens. But it's when you start to get resistance that I think is really where you start to kind of earn that reputation of, I'm gonna do this because I know I'm right and I know I need to do it. And then the flip side is to not leave that room angry about the fact that you were challenged. I try to leave those rooms and say, why are they thinking like that? What can I do to kind of change that thought process? We would be kidding ourselves if we don't leave those rooms sometimes extremely frustrated. But I see my job as, how do I make that room more accepting for that next woman I'm bringing up, that next chief I'm ready to promote. That's probably the hardest part, is how do you take that anger and to motivate it into something more productive than just that? Because that's what it is. You're frustrated.
Yeah, that counsel of turning anger from anger into translation of something productive and leaving the emotion in the room when you leave. Not always my best trait. I can admit to that it's sometimes that emotion. I think as women, we carry that emotion. And so how do you leave it in the boardroom? How do you leave it with the decision? And how do you trust the decision and lean into it? We've spent a lot of time at Verizon talking about leadership as a profession that requires practice. And I think so much of what you're talking about is how do we really practice leadership? How do we learn to have inclusivity in the conversations that we're having so that we've really had a chance to get people's input before we make decisions so that we can trust the decision, trust our voice, not just squeak it out, but then, lean into that decision. Tamika, you talked about, and I appreciate you talking about what it's like to be a woman of color. There's been so much conversation in 2020 about racial injustice and how do we really have a different angle on racial equality. And so I appreciate you raising that. And as I think about women, then I think about women of color, as we think about the progress that needs to be had. So proud of your accomplishments and the way you're really leading the way for women of color. How should we think about what more we can do there to get into a space where we openly talk about what it's like to be a person of color and create an environment that creates equality? I'd welcome your thoughts.
Sure. I think one of the lessons learned along the way through my journey is owning who you are and not being afraid to exist in discomfort at times. And also recognizing that we need to be color brave. To say that you're colorblind can sometimes be dismissive because I need you to see my color because that is important and that matters to me. It matters to those that have been marginalized in many ways. And so just the fact that we're still having to have this type of conversation and create a space to talk about this in 2020 shows that there's still work to be done around having conversations around systems that have been in place or things that we've perpetuated and not challenged in ways to make certain that there is opportunity for all. When I think about the students that are in our care, I'm committed and responsible for making certain they have every opportunity to be successful, regardless of who they are or their background or where they come from. So creating intentional space safe spaces to have conversations. And then there needs to be this ongoing dialogue and ongoing commitment to breaking down and dismantling, some of the systems that are in place that that are not intended for all to be successful. So those conversations, I say, this is a starting point, but there's much work to be done.
I love that idea of being color brave as opposed to color blind, because you can really visualize what that might look like. And I think about your work in education and how important that is to really create the environment where everybody can be successful. So I also appreciate your expectation that we create systems that move us forward from progress. I had a chance to talk to Adam and Kathy from NBA and WNBA the other day, and we were talking about how the NBA, I think you mentioned basketball, so I'll raise it here, really leaned into when they were in their bubble and there was the emotion around should they play games, should they not, moving from emotion into action. And I think that's what you're really talking about, to say what is the systemic change that you drive so that there's forward progress. Beth, I think about what's happening in December as we count down to the end of the year and a change in our administration and all the planning that has gone into a normal administration change, let alone an administrative change in the midst of COVID. As somebody who sat at the table for FEMA, what must be on people's minds as they're preparing for an administration change and to continue to battle COVID with the increasing numbers that we're seeing now? And what guidance would you give them if you could give them words of wisdom?
Yeah, thank you for that. Because yes, it is difficult when you go through the transition changes. And so you go from having political leadership, they put in acting career leadership, and then looking forward to who's going to step into those shoes in the political leadership going forward with the next administration. So there is a lot of changeover and turmoil that happens. And the number one thing, though, that I learned when I was there, that the good career people that are there all the time through this, it is their goal and their reason for being there to really help all of the staff. There's 15,000 people that work just at FEMA, but when you look across the whole federal government, going through this type of change and what they've been through for the last 4 years. And so just really how you can keep them focused on what it is. And at FEMA, the mission is to help take care of people in those days of their worst days. And how FEMA is supporting Health and Human Services, HHS, and trying to support the locals, the states, the locals, the tribes, the territories, as they go from these last 10 months practically now of dealing with the virus and now moving into the vaccine phases. And how is that going to work? How's that going to roll out? The big talk about national plans versus every state doing their own. So really, it'll be very important for that group to be able to converse with their stakeholders so that everybody is doing the same thing. Everybody has the same information, I should say, and then taking it and to be able to do what they need to do to take care of all of their residents within those states and territories and tribes.
Yeah, I think this clarity of mission and leaning in on the experts is advice for all of us and such a powerful reminder, particularly in the midst of change. Trisha, as I think about what you've been through in 2020 and the changing kind of information on the disease of COVID and the reaction and response you have every day, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day to whatever the disaster emergency might be, starting with fire, but much broader than that, how do you prepare your team as you think about the uncertainty of the situation they might face and the changing set of information that's available for you in terms of how do you keep your employees safe and how do you then care for the customers that you're serving in the general public?
Well, we've never seen such an equally balanced of the internal customer versus the external customer. And for us, or for me specifically, my firefighters are my internal customer, and how I take care of them. Our focus has always been how we take care of our community. And, as firefighters, we'll get to ourselves next. And we immediately recognize we can't operate like that. And it's really, really hard to be able to take that mentality and have firefighters understand if we don't care for you first in some of these scenarios, there is nobody to care for the community. And that's really what we're seeing. There's been a huge mental health aspect for my clinicians and firefighters where everybody is cross-trained in my department. So you are a firefighter along with being an EMTB or a paramedic. So you serve both roles at all times during your 24-hour shift. And what we've seen from the command staff and the executive leadership staff is I have never seen nor with some of the senior staff here that have talked about how fast you develop policy and how quickly you make those changes. And if there was ever a time to be certain about decision making, now is the time. Normally we kind of strategize with decision making of emergent in the field versus non-emergent. And Elizabeth, I see the smile on your face as you're doing the same things. Having those practices of how you command a fire ground and make split seconds decisions that truly are life and death, some of those behaviors have translated into a conference room, which is remarkable. And it's been a challenge. It's certainly not something that we can't overcome. And like everybody else, really the challenges we overcome is this is also a home to them. So there is no difference of what you do in your home and stay-at-home orders or that type of thing. We have firehouses with, 8, 10 people in them. That is also their home and their families 24, 48 hours. So it can be, I think, mentally confusing is kind of the way I wrap it all together. There is no difference or separation. So it's one of the greatest times to be in leadership. The things that we have learned in our positions, I would not change it for the world. I'm incredibly proud of my department and what we've been able to do. There's certainly more sleep, hopefully, in the future. That's really what I'm banking on. But Tamika talks about how you care for your students. That is your job. They are your family. You have to take care of them 24/7.
Yeah, I do hope there's more sleep in all of your futures. I think about the incredible work you're doing, and there has never been a better time to be a leader as you think about the decisions that need to be made with limited information and yet the urgency of the decisions. And you talk about kind of your key customers, internal, external. We talk at Verizon about 4 stakeholders, how we serve our employees, how we serve our customers, our shareholders, and then society at more broadly. How do we think about our responsibility to give back and be part of the change that's happening from a societal standpoint? I think about the relationship we have with each of the verticals that you've been part of, whether it's the fire department and first responders, whether it's FEMA, or whether it's educators. Verizon has continued to play a proud role in being a partner of choice for the work that is done. I'm realizing the importance of that connectivity. So just a big thank you on behalf of Verizon for the work that you and your colleagues do. I'm conscious of the fact that we've got a lot of Q&A that I want to make sure we get time to, but I do have one last question for each of you because I know it's something that is on the mind of so many that are watching today. If you're watching today and you say, I'd like to achieve what these women have achieved, what advice and counsel do you have for people that are watching, male or female, that say, wow, I'd love to be a leader in these women? Tamika, I'm going to start with you. What advice and counsel would you give?
Sure. 3 things come to mind for me. The first being, it's okay to be ambitious. There'll be naysayers that say that, there's this pathway that you need to follow, but be deliberate and create your own pathway. Dream big. And I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a CFO, I'm a sister, I'm a friend. I'm so many different things. So you can do it if you're being deliberate and intentional in your actions. And I think that third important piece is when you have a seat at the table, you've got to use it. So don't be afraid to step out there and dream big and challenge yourself to do more. And you don't have to wait. Don't wait for permission to do something that you feel like needs to be done. Take control of your destiny.
Such great advice. One of our board members, Shelley Archambault, recently published a book, Unapologetically Ambitious. And I think it just captures so much of what you've just said. So she doesn't know I'm making a plug for the book. I've read it. It's awesome, but it just really takes and frames up what you've just said. Trisha, advice and counsel, what would you give us?
I'm a very checklist person, reality based, and so I absolutely agree. You know, if there's something you want to do, by all means, if your goal is to be the fire chief or be an astronaut, but the reality piece is you have to be willing to do the work. And I can honestly 100% probably say that every person sitting on this screen has given up something to do the work. They have sat at their desk during a beautiful summer weekend to type a research paper. They have stayed up till midnight doing research on whatever needs to be done for the next day. So while you can be and do whatever you want, that is only if you are willing to do the work to actually achieve that. And then the other piece that is another reality-based piece is when somebody says you can have it all. I believe you can have it all. You might not be able to have it all at the same time because you have to really level with yourself about what you're capable of handling, because you can have it all and be absolutely miserable. So I always just try to tell young women in any profession, yes, you can have it all, but it might not all happen at the same time. So don't set yourself up for failure and disappoint yourself in that way. Just, take it as it comes and grab for more when you're ready to grab for more. Grab high. There's no reason you shouldn't reach high for it, but grab for more when you're ready. Keep yourself full.
I love that. And this expectation that there's balance, I think that's a myth. It's about recognizing it may not all come at the same time. The other piece I think is so powerful with that is put your own oxygen mask on first, because when you're trying to do it all, you better take care of yourself or you won't have the capacity to do for others. So I think such an important reminder. Beth, I'm going to give you the last word on advice and counsel. You've just are so widely recognized for your accomplishments in the work that you've done with FEMA. Give us your advice and counsel.
Take the opportunities when they come to you. When I got asked to go back and be part of the FEMA team back in 2009, it was not on my radar. It was not a goal of mine by any means, but the opportunity came and I did it. So, and I got there through the networking. Reach out to people. And the number one thing I would tell people at FEMA when I was talking to them about growing and as they get into their careers is stretch yourself. Don't be happy with just, okay, here's my path, here's what my supervisor has said I can do and how I grow, but stretch yourself and just really go out there and go for it. But the number one thing is be authentic, be yourself. Don't try to be the other person that did the same thing that you want to do, but be yourself and work through that to get where you want to go, I think is very important.
Such great advice of seize the moment, but be authentic to who you are, because life will be a lot better along the way as you do that. Ladies, thank you for the advice and counsel. I'm going to turn it back to Jeremy to moderate Q&A, and then I think I get the final word. Jeremy, back to you.
Thank you, Tami. Always the final word. Got to say, the conversation here is great, and people are loving it online. Inspirational. Shout outs to Maryland and everywhere else in between where you guys are or where y'all are representing today. I want to jump into some of the questions here. A lot of conversation has been about the good that has happened. Rosalind has a really good question. I'm going to go around the bend here. What's the worst advice someone has ever given you, and how did you make it work for you? Beth, I'll start with you.
Oh, great. Thank you. The worst advice I ever got. Probably when people tell me to just follow all the processes. There's a process for this and you got to do it. So follow the process. Well, if you're in the federal government, the processes will kill you. You will get nowhere. Whether you're trying to manage a program or, just figure out how to fill out a timesheet. But, really it's, look at what processes are there. But as I say, tell people, go look at what the real rules are, because there are certain processes that need to be followed. But really look at what the rules are. And you don't always have to follow the specific processes. Look at your outcome instead of the process. What is the outcome you want to do and how can you get there?
Great lesson. Tamika, what do you have to add to that one?
I'll say some poor advice that I've received was the idea of me needing to wait. You know, you need to wait until you get a little bit older, or you need to wait until you've had kids, or, you know, it's this idea of I needed to wait. And I think that your time is your time, and what's for you is for you. I heard Beth say, you know, carpe diem, seize the day. So don't maximize on every opportunity that you have. And don't look at it as though I'm only, you know, 25 or I'm only 43. Know that you can do it and have that confidence in yourself to do the work, as Trisha said, so that you will be prepared and ready.
That's a good one. Carpe diem. Never forget that advice. Trisha, rounding this one out with you, the worst advice you've ever received and how you made it work for you.
Well, there's two things I hate to hear anywhere in the fire department, and that's starting a sentence with historically, comma. That one really never goes over well. I appreciate institutional knowledge. And then the answer, but Chief, this is the way we've always done it. So those to me, boy, those are two big hot ones. And whether you want to take that as advice or not, you can certainly tell a certain mind frame and where we're starting with exploring different options.
Good advice. Tami, anything you want to add, you know, over the years of your career, some bad advice you got and how you made it work for you?
Yeah, I think these women have captured it so well. It's always the way we've done it, or you need to wait, you're not quite ready, or here are the rules, play by the rules. Rules are made to be broken when you understand where the ethics are. And so when you're clear on the ethics, then you define a different path to an outcome. And so, you know, playing by the traditional rules of this is the way we've always done it absolutely won't work, particularly in the kind of environment we've lived in 2020, where the information is different every single day. The situation is different. You have to make real-time decisions. And so you have to redefine what success looks like, but understand the mission and what you're trying to do. And that will clarify what those roles should be.
Great. Dr. Tamika, I'll go to this one for you. Amelia wants to know, how could young women be prepared to be better leaders? You're an educator. How do you start that at a young age? What do you put in front of young folks to make them better leaders? Because as we've all heard, leaders just aren't born. You've got to work at this.
Sure. So, you know, you don't have to be in a position to be a leader. You lead from the space or the moment that you are in. And I will also offer up that having an exemplar, you know, having a mentor, someone that you aspire to be like, that you've been able to connect with, or that you even desire to connect with. That's always a good way to sharpen your leadership belt, if I can say it that way. So connecting with others that have a pathway that you aspire to travel along, and reaching out and making certain that you get that insight, that advice from others that have already charted that territory along the way.
That's great. Beth, this question for you coming from Marcy. What advice do you have to help bring up women who feel trapped or unqualified? How do they get beyond that point?
So yeah, I appreciate that question, because there are a lot of women. I mean, there's a lot of people that feel trapped in jobs, or where can I go? And I'd say get out and look, research, you know, what is it you want to do? So the first thing is, you know, if you're feeling trapped, what is it you want to do? What is it that you don't like about what it is you're feeling trapped about? So really look to what you want and then put that out there. Because I think as you start to talk about it, and don't be afraid to talk about it. So if you're working for, you know, in any organization, make sure, you know, talk to your supervisor about it. At FEMA all the time, we would get people whose supervisors wanted to keep them trapped where they are. It's like that job, that's what you're qualified for. That's what you're going to get. But people wanted to grow and to move on. So look for those opportunities to train yourself, to take extra networks where you could go meet other people, get out of your own little area if you're in an organization or wherever you're working, but look for those areas to network maybe with other companies, different things that are socially, obviously during this time, it's very difficult during COVID. But once we can get out and be more networked, look for those opportunities, I think are very key.
Great. Thank you for that. I'm going to wrap on this one for the chief and then back over to Tami. Is the glass ceiling more evident in public sector than private? And do women have to do more work to reach the top, to reach the position where all of you are? What do you think about that?
I think the honest answer is yes, we do have to do more work. I think the piece that goes with that is when I got in the fire service, I knew I was getting in a male-dominated career, and I was okay with that. I wanted to do this. I had figured out who I was and what really inspired me to want to do work like this. And I think it's all in how you look at it. I was okay with doing the work because I felt an internal calmness of that I was prepared. And there are times that I think we overly challenge ourselves, and that becomes more of a mental game. You know, I'm going to do this because the men can do this. But I think there is still that reality piece, even though the benchmarks have become more equal. There's no longer male and female standards, and there are things like that. But I think you could probably ask any woman in a fire station if she felt like she had to do more, and the answer would be yes. A very perfect short example of this is, you know, when you hop on the rig and go to the back and go to pull hose because you're at a structure fire, if you go to pull the hose and it doesn't move and you're a woman, it's because you're weak and you weren't strong enough to pull it. If you're a man and it doesn't move, well, it's because something's wrong with the hose, right? It's stuck. It's been loaded wrong, or and again, this isn't to say that it's male versus female, man versus woman, but it is the challenges that we talk about. Just when Tamika talks about, you know, black versus white and those challenges, it's however they have bubbled up in whatever your career is. There are tremendous men and women that have done everything they possibly can to help narrow that gap, just like we're trying to do together on this screen. But it is, there are some differences. The first part of your question, the public-private, I think Elizabeth might be in a better position to answer that just based on your background. I have trouble seeing that from my current position.
Beth, anything you want to add there?
So I'd say it's probably tough in both areas. Whether it's government or in the private sector. I think both of them, I mean, women have to really go out and get what they want. They have to put their goals out there. I don't see a difference in that regard as far as women being treated differently in private versus public.
Great.
Yeah, I think so much power when you say kind of know the landscape, embrace the challenge, and then widen the path for those that come behind. Because, you know, Tamika, you talk about your role in moving from being an educator to being CFO and running operations. That's a tough path because people don't expect that to be the path you take. And so it's about knowing that landscape. It's about embracing the fact that likely you will have to work harder, but then work hard and widen that path so that it's easier for the people that come behind us. And I think, Jeremy, that's part of what we've done today. I hope that's part of what we've done today.
Certainly so. And with that, no more questions. So I hand it back over to you, Tami. Thank you all for your service, your answers. I certainly appreciate y'all joining us today.
Yeah, Jeremy, thank you so much. And let me just add a sincere thank you for the service that you provide to the public. There is not a thank you big enough for the work that you do. But thank you for sharing today very transparently and very openly with this group. I'm walking away from today inspired. This has been a hard year. And I think the resiliency of women as we think about, we've seen more women drop out of the workforce than ever before with COVID and the responsibilities of educating in family care during a COVID crisis. You know, listening to this conversation today, I'm inspired to say women can do anything. Dream big, do the work, own your seat at the table, and really find the path along the way. And I thank you for being so willing to talk about what you do, to not only talk about it, but action it in the way you show up. I also appreciate that you were willing to talk about some difficult topics. So whether it's race or whether it's mental health or whether it's what it's like to be a woman, you've talked about all those topics and really given us some things to ponder and some things to think about as we look at how do we really reignite women in the workforce, a sense of equality and opportunity for everybody. I would be remiss if I didn't do just one last shout out to CircleAround and National Association of Women Business Owners for being part of our series of Women in Business as we wrap up our 5th and final episode with this impressive team of women in the public sector. Thank you so much. I wish each of you good health, peace, and joy as we enter into the holiday season. Thank you so much.